So welcome back, guys, to another video, and today I want to talk about my personal 10 out of 10 video games. Now, a 10 out of 10 is very subjective because you're essentially calling the game perfect, and I do agree when some people say there's no such thing as a 10 out of 10 game. Every game needs some sort of improvement or needs some sort of fix. I do agree with that, but when I think about the perfect video game, these are games that I think of, and while this is a top 10, this isn't any sort of particular order. So like when I get to like number 1, it's not like that's the ultimate video game. That's just, you know, the numbers of the 10 out of 10 video games. But let's go ahead and get into it. The first one we'll talk about is Halo 2 on the original Xbox. Now, I'll say first and foremost, I am not a big first-person shooter gamer, but there's a huge amount of respect that I have for Halo 2. And while some people may even argue that there are better Halos out there, Halo 2, in my opinion, revolutionized not just the first-person shooter genre, not only online gaming, but also helped put the original Xbox on the map. This new console from Microsoft that was, you know, competing with the big boys of PlayStation, Nintendo, and even Sega at the time. So this was something very special. I remember when I worked at Babbage's during the midnight release and I saw everyone picking up Halo 2, and I saw the big television that we rented, the Halo tournament that we're having, the pizza party. I knew I was experiencing a moment in gaming history. And I'm so glad that folks can play Halo 2 now with the Master Chief Collection and an experience, you know, something that I saw eons ago, but I can remember like it was yesterday. And also with Halo 2, I love the story. I love the fact that, you know, you just didn't play as Master Chief, but you also play as the Arbiter as well. So you got, you know, two different kinds of gameplay, different weapons, and two sides of the spectrum of Halo lore. And there's a lot of lore to Halo. It's not just some game that you run around and kill things. There's actual story to it. And Halo 2 is definitely one of those games that deserves a 10 out of 10. This next game, in my opinion, is a no-brainer, and I have a couple of no-brainers on this list. But Sonic the Hedgehog 2 on the Sega Genesis. When I want to get a Genesis fix, 9 times out of 10, one of the first games I pick up is Sonic 2. I remember when I finally got a Sega Genesis, that was the game I had to get. And, you know, there's just something special about Sonic 2. Now, some people may even say the Sonic 3 is better. Some people may prefer the first Sonic the Hedgehog, but Sonic 2 is just that perfect middle ground. It has an amazing soundtrack. The graphics still hold up to this day. Fantastic level design. It's just a really good game all around, and I feel like Sonic 2 was the staple of what other Sonic games would become in the future. Now, of course, it kind of went on its own beaten path when it comes to the Sonic series, but you can't go wrong with Sonic 2. No matter what, you can't go wrong with that game. Definitely a 10 out of 10. Now, this game, I feel like I'm not even worthy to talk about. This is one of the most amazing games I ever played, and it's a part of my favorite series of all time. You guys know I'm talking about Castlevania. But which Castlevania title? That, of course, is going to be Castlevania Dracula X Rondo of Blood on the PC Engine CD. What a shame that the Western audience until years later got to experience this game, unless you imported the game, of course, which was quite a pretty penny. But this, to me, is essentially what Castlevania is. It's stage-based. It's got fantastic sprite work. It has that red band audio. The music is just so iconic. You know, playing as Richter Belmont, he's super agile. He has his little backflip jump. I mean, I know there are some folks out there that will argue that Super Castlevania 4 is a much better game because of the whip mechanic. I'll be honest, I'm not a big fan of the whip mechanic in Castlevania 4. I'm not a big fan of it. You know, the little... I'm not a big fan of it, but I am a huge fan of Rondo of Blood. As a matter of fact, Rondo of Blood was so iconic that the game's sprite work would be recycled into other Castlevanias. 9 times out of 10, if you play any sort of Metroidvania, like if you're checking out the Castlevania Advanced Collection, a lot of the sprite work is actually recycled from Rondo of Blood. That's how iconic this game is. And it's got so much replay value because you play as Richter Belmont, which is your classic Belmont action. Then you unlock Maria Bernard, who is just this little girl that throws birds, and it makes the game a lot easier, but she was definitely a different kind of character and a different flavor for the Castlevania games. And the game had achievements before the Xbox 360, before the PlayStation 3 trophy system. This game had tons of replay value, branching paths, so there's no just... While this game is stage-based, there's no just linear way to play this game. I cannot stress enough that if you've never played Castlevania, Rondo of Blood would be the game I would recommend. And sadly, it's such a good game that I feel like if you were to play Rondo of Blood first, there are so many games that would have to live up to that title, but it's well worth it. Such a great game. Now, I wanted to add a beat 'em up to this list, and what is my favorite beat 'em up? What is my 10 out of 10 beat 'em up? The original Streets of Rage. I played Streets of Rage the first time on the Genesis 6-pack when I got my Genesis. It came with 6 different titles, and one of those games was Streets of Rage. And Yuzo Koshiro's music is still so iconic. I still listen to that soundtrack to this day. I love the characters that you play as. They all have their different movesets, different special moves. And this is going to sound funny, but I like the fact that you could grab the enemy and flip over them and do another special attack. I feel like the move set in Streets of Rage was really good. And when you're playing a beat 'em up, the fighting and the move sets have to be fun, because while beat 'em ups are not essentially that long of a game, it can get very boring if the fighting isn't fun. Streets of Rage is fun. It's a game that I can play by myself, I can play with other people, and it's still just a classic game. I freaking love Streets of Rage. The next game I want to talk about is a shooter. You guys know I had to add a shmup in there. And what is my 10 out of 10 shmup of choice? Would be Ikaruga. Now, Ikaruga was a very special game in the sense that it does something a little different than other bullet hells or other shooters, in the fact that your ship has a very interesting mechanic of changing from a black ship to a white ship. That, unlike other shooters, you're not trying to depend in desperation of bombs or power-ups. This is essentially a shooter game of chess, okay? Because you have various enemies that are black and white, and you have to switch your ship around to, weaken the blow or just not take the blow or make a more powerful shot. It's a game that, honestly, the best way to get good at Ikaruga is to die a lot. You just have to die, and you have to learn from your mistakes and find different strategies, and to me, that's what makes it a perfect shooter. It's just not some mindless, space shooter where you're hearing a bunch of house music and you're just holding the button down and just killing everything. You actually have to think about, what is the next objective? What's the next thing that's coming? What is the best opportunity for victory? What's the best way that I can approach this next boss? It's a very special game, and I'm so glad that, at one time it was just an import on the Dreamcast. They re-released it on the GameCube, and it was one of the most must-haves when I had that console, and now you can play it on modern systems, and I'm so glad. If you are a big shooter fan and if you have not played Ikaruga, it's a 10 out of 10. You need to play it. Now, when I think of role-playing games, when I think of JRPGs, what is my 10 out of 10 JRPG? That's going to be, I kind of already gave it away, Final Fantasy III, also known as Final Fantasy VI in Japan. This, to me, is just a special game. This game, came out for the Super Nintendo, but it's aged like fine wine with its storytelling and just its cinematics. This game had cinematics, but it was this interactive feeling, this interactive world. You got to understand, when Final Fantasy III came out, everything was medieval. Everything was very based off Dungeons and Dragons, where Final Fantasy VI kind of gives you that, like steampunk, advanced technology, ruined world of magic, and you're playing as Terra, who is like one of the last natural magic users, and you would think, Terra would be the star of the show, and it would all revolve around her, and it does to some parts, but the party that you have in Final Fantasy VI, everyone has their own backstory, everyone has their own purpose, And that's just what makes the game very special. And it's also got one of my favorite bad guys of all time, and that is Kifka. Kifka was a very special bad guy because he wasn't, seeking to become a god. He wasn't some extra terrestrial life form that came to the Earth. He wasn't some warlord. He was actually portrayed as a klutz. I would call him the Toby of Final Fantasy for all you Naruto fans out there. He was what you would at least expect as the biggest threat in the game, and he's like the Joker. He doesn't want to just take over the world. He just wants to see it burn. He just wants chaos, and I think that is such a nice character development that, to this day, I will tell people that are like, I want to play an old school JRPG. Final Fantasy VI. Definitely check it out. And now you can play it on the Pixel Remaster that Square Enix came out with, and I cannot recommend that enough if you have not experienced Final Fantasy III yet. Now, there are some games that I feel like are so good that we just don't appreciate them anymore, because is this a part of the norm? Because this game has been released on so many platforms, and it's getting another re-release. Matter of fact, I know a lot of people that were sucking their teeth when they heard of a re-release of this game, but this game to me is a 10 out of 10, and there's a reason why more people need to experience this title. And of course, I'm talking about The Elder Scrolls Skyrim. Say what you will about Skyrim, but this was a very special game that I feel like really set the bar high for Western RPGs. This was a very special game that I still have memories to this day when I first started playing it. I remember there was a time that I was in the Dark Brotherhood, and I was actually a werewolf, and I had this stealth mission at this big high elf party. They took away all my weapons, they took away all my inventory, and I had to stealthily find a way to kill this guy. And I blew my cover. I just turned into a werewolf and killed everybody. I had such a huge bounty on my head after that experience, but it was so fun. And it's a game that admittedly I haven't played since the 360, but it's a 10 out of 10. This is such a well done game that, for those who have still not experienced Skyrim, I'm so happy that if they have an Xbox 360, or they have the Xbox One, or a PlayStation 5, PlayStation 4, or PC, they can go back and play the world of Skyrim, because it is definitely an amazing game, and it's a game to this day that I still love. And it was revolutionary for the fact that you could dual weapon. That was awesome. I love the fact that I could, heal myself while shooting magic at the same time, setting a fire to people while I'm healing myself and just backing up into a corner. And those freaking trolls, oh my god, those giants that would just smack you and send you flying in the air. It's an amazing game. It's a 10 out of 10. I absolutely love The Elder Scrolls Skyrim. Now, this next game, I actually got a little bit of controversy on my channel when I gave this game a 10 out of 10. Because I had the game sent to me by the developers, and a lot of people thought I was just, shilling. They thought I, got paid under the table or something. They were like, oh, man, there's no way this game's 10 out of 10. It's not worth the price. But here's the thing. If you're a huge fan of the series and you actually played the game, you can see why this is a 10 out of 10. And I'm, of course, talking about Monster Boy and the Cursed Kingdom. I'm a huge Wonder Boy fan, okay? And this game is not just a nostalgia tug at the shirt. It's not just trying to make you relive the old days. It's a game within itself. It's a spiritual successor to the Wonder Boy series, and it's just such a well-crafted game. Now, you're playing as Jin, and you're trying to stop your crazy uncle that's turning people into animals, including yourself. And I will say that you have various animals that you change into in this game, but none of the power-ups and none of the animal transformations feel like a burden. There's games that you get power-ups that you're like, oh, I really don't like that power-up. But there was never one part in this game that I was like, oh, I hate being the frog, or I hate being the lion. There was so much to this game that I absolutely loved. I love that they, threw in some, throwback music in there, and they remixed some of it. So it's got that nostalgia there, but it's just a good game. As a matter of fact, when I'm on Twitter, and FDG, the developers of this game, if they ever have a sale and they post on Twitter by, hey, Monster Boy's on sale on the eShop for $5, I'm like, I automatically make a comment. I'm like, you guys need to buy this game. This game is so good. It is so amazing. I love Monster Boy and the Cursed Kingdom. It's a 10 out of 10. Now, the next game, I don't think anyone can really argue that this game revolutionized and defined arcade gaming. It revolutionized and defined the fighting game genre. And like Skyrim, it's one of those games that gets released so many times that I don't feel like we even appreciate it that much anymore. And that is Street Fighter 2. Now, Street Fighter 2 has definitely had so many releases and so many different versions. Now, my preferred version of Street Fighter 2 is Championship Edition. I feel like that it's the perfect balance. It's not too fast. I feel like hyper fighting, when you get the Street Fighter Turbo, Super, all that stuff, I feel like it starts almost playing in fast forward, where I feel like the balance and the speed is perfect in Championship Edition. And, you know, it's a game that I love so much that I honestly, I own so many copies of it. I own so many copies, including the arcade 1-up cabinet I have in my living room. I love Street Fighter 2, and it doesn't matter what console I have. You know, 20 years from now, I could have like the PlayStation 15 or something like that. And if they release Street Fighter 2, I will be getting it day one, because that is a 10 out of 10. It's a game that I can play by myself. It's a game that I can play online. And it's a game that, honestly, when I go to an arcade, if they don't have a Street Fighter 2 cabinet, it's not an arcade. There's just something special about that game. That is a game that you have to have in any arcade cabinet. You have to have a copy of Street Fighter 2, because it is a 10 out of 10 fighting game. A true masterpiece. Now, the last game I want to talk about is actually the second video game I ever played. The first game I ever played was Missile Command. And then when I got my Nintendo Entertainment System, the packing game was Super Mario Bros. 3. Now, I made a video about a year ago where I did a comparison of Super Mario Bros. 3 and Super Mario World. And while I prefer Super Mario World, there's a huge respect for Super Mario Bros. 3. It kind of paved the way of what we would perceive platforming gaming later on in the future. And what I love about Super Mario Bros. 3 is each world is something different, and everyone has their favorite world. You can talk to some people, and some people like the water world, some people like the sky world, but regardless, we love Super Mario Bros. 3, and it's just one of those games that, honestly, I play once a year. I play it all the way through from World 1 all the way to World 8, and I absolutely love Super Mario Bros. 3. It's just such a timeless classic. I can't see any sort of faults in this game whatsoever. It is truly a 10 out of 10 masterpiece of a video game. But anyway, guys, those are my 10 out of 10 video games. What are some games that you feel are 10 out of 10? Leave a comment below. I'd love to hear some of your thoughts and opinions. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe, but also hit that bell so you're notified on all future videos that come out on this channel. Anyway, guys, as always, thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. And as always, happy gaming.